Is that might help. I actually was muted. Okay, let's start again. He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy, says innocent bystander. Osbel, hello. We're talking about your former member. I can't. Yay! And yes, hello, Robin. Yay! And Dane Dane says, Brazil more hot water than a coffee bean at 5 a.m. Look, I muted it. I got so excited about this. So I don't know whether you actually watched the hearing yesterday. I sat through the whole hearing. I know Plan to Create did as well, and we were chatting. Hello, Terry. We were chatting through various parts of it, and I said to actually, I had to go to the doctor, and I went to doctor early because I thought I can't miss this. And then the doctor wanted to check my lungs and said you've got to have a CT scan, and I got called for the CT scan just as he was doing his opening statement. Got that done. I'm fine. My lungs, I haven't got no damage on it, which is great. I'm happy about that. But look, there is so the toe cutters are circulating like hungry sharks. They can smell blood in the water. Yes. So, I mean, Barilaro was throwing every man and his dog under the bus. He threw the Premier under the bus. He threw the Treasurer, now Deputy Minister, under the bus. He put the former Minister under the bus. But what was really interesting was the evidence or the allegations. There were a couple of very interesting things from there. One was the timeline of events and how he stood up at a press conference and said that the defamation was stressful on him, but it turned out that Gladys resigned, and he decided to resign too. So it didn't seem to have anything to do with Friendly Geordies. Osbel said, must have been a big bus. Oh, yes. And then the fact that he rang the head of Investment New South Wales and recommended a certain female for a job in the office. And it just so happened to be the woman he shacked up with. Now, I did put in brackets, I'm a victim, because that was, Barilaro has stated that he's the victim in all of this. He's the victim. He's done nothing wrong. The whole process was independent, and everybody's picking on him, and it's not fair, and he just wants a nice, simple life. And that's all he wants. Yeah. So we're going to look at some articles. We're going to look at some clips, because I've even noticed Sky News has actually started to turn on the New South Wales government. And when Sky News starts turning their back on the New South Wales government, you know that there's a problem. And I will go off camera at some point in time because I've got some food coming as well. But yes, it was a big bus. So where are we going to start? Let's start at let's have a look at Twitter, because Twitter has been amazing. So let's go with Twitter. I've got a million tabs open here. Oops, that's the wrong Twitter. This one. I can't do anything right. So it was John Barilaro who created the $300 million fund that Perrottet used to make the illegal $5.5 million Wagga Club grant. Perrottet, Barilaro, and heirs at the heart of both Gun Club and Barilaro New York scandals. There's been a release from the Premier to say that the person that's going to be investigating Minister Ayres, ironically, is the lawyer that was the lawyer of alleged war criminal Ben Roberts-Smith. Do that as you wish. Watching John Barilaro convince himself he's a victim here is just incredible. You have to feel sympathy for John Barilaro for the suffering he has endured in the New York Trade Post fiasco. If you need assistance, I've heard John Barilaro is very good at everything. A link to The Guardian. I'm medically retired, physical and mental health issues. There is nothing wrong with John Barilaro other than he is corrupt. His next job should be as a cook in jail. Cal says he's furious at Barilaro's response. From Trump to New York, John Barilaro went to go to New York. Did he want to genuflect with the Golden Altar? Funny how both houses are falling apart right now. Thanks to John Barilaro, the Kosciuszko National Park is now infested with feral horses, turning pristine waters into filthy swamps. Name those pests, both of them. Much of your account is laughing at John Barilaro. Perrottet not aware of flaws in trade process. New South Wales opposition leaders really been lapping up the fiasco. Parrots that can say, I don't recall, are being sought by everyone that has had a contact with John Barilaro. That was his favourite saying, I don't recall. It says, John Barilaro is a scrambled egg. So friendly, trying to unscramble eggs indeed. John Barilaro self-hugs, thumbs up confident, hand to chest fear, brow lift lying, ventilates jacket to displace heat stress, increased deception, hand block to control, smirks, chin raise, extreme arrogance, and superiority. So they were the many faces of John Barilaro. I know, it's not you. They're very rare at the moment. A day later, I'm still stunned John Barilaro's third referee wasn't Eddie O'Band. He planned to create. We were just saying, we watched it. Several of us watched it. Surely the fact that John Barilaro did not anticipate the public perception of his appointment and consequent political fallout should blow back his enablers. John Barilaro is like there wasn't a moon landing. The earth was flat. Coal is clean. Climate change is just weather. John Barilaro is starting to look like the wall of shame. Just in case anyone is remotely buying John Barilaro's I'm being persecuted, I'm the victim drivel, let me advise you that victims rarely get a parliamentary inquiry into their conduct. Just in case there's some really thick Australians out there, hi, Abby. John Barilaro is a victim and Julian Assange is a perpetrator. If that sounds wrong, your brain is A-OK, 5 out of 5. I'm ready to fly forward. I guess the moral of John Barilaro's story is that if you question him in any way, be friendly Geordies, cameraman or parliamentary inquiry. He's not a wolf in sheep's clothing. I lived in New South Wales and was unemployed. I'd demand my job service provider to put on the John Barilaro plan, but with expertise. Oops, thank you. My son's just bought me dinner. Ooh, all right. As for John Barilaro using the word trauma to describe what he experienced, so he has copped a bit of it. So if you think John Barilaro is unlucky, just imagine what it was like being a koala in New South Wales. So he did not like being questioned. So let's go to Sky News first, because as I said, Sky News was fascinating. So this is what Sky News had to say. Hopefully you can hear it. I'll see what I can do. I'm going to take myself off camera. Oh, wrong one. All right. It's been a while since I've done this. You'll have to tell me if you can hear audio. Oh. All right. Let's see whether this works.
Let's get straight to all the key news out of that hearing with our political editor, Andrew Clennell, who's been taking a forensic look at all of it. And colleagues of John Barilaro.
Can you hear that?
Current and former getting a mention, including the former Premier and current High Commissioner to India, Barilaro.
Yes, I guess it just becomes murkier, this affair, Kieran. We're expected to believe that John Barilaro, former Deputy Premier, goes for this job with the Premier knowing about it, and a former Liberal Premier actually providing a reference and it's supposed to be at arm's length. So
even Sky News are going, you expect us to believe.
he was quite reluctant at first to name his third referee, and he sought permission in the break from Barry O'Farrell, who's now the High Commissioner to India. But let's not forget, resigned for misleading ICAC.
How did Barry O'Farrell get to India? And don't forget, he was pulled up by ICAC. It was over a bottle of wine, wasn't it, Barry O'Farrell? Wasn't it over a bottle of wine?
Arm's length. So he was quite reluctant at first to name his third referee, and he sought permission in the break from Barry O'Farrell, who's now the High Commissioner to India. But let's not forget, resigned for misleading ICAC. It wasn't just over a bottle of wine. He didn't recall a $3,000 bottle of grapes being delivered to his house. And indeed, when I was working at the Daily Telegraph, we polled what people thought of that. 55% certainly thought he would have recalled it. And he is the one who provided the reference, the third reference for this job. Have a listen to John Barilaro.
All right, here we go.
Talking about that.
I would have sought Mr. O'Farrell's support as a referee, after the application period. Do you understand that that would have put a lot of pressure on the public service should they decided to refuse you? Not at all, because firstly, it was the recruitment agency that conducted the referee reports. So that's the first point. The second point is that we have an apolitical public service.
And in the last couple of hours,
it's an apolitical public service, apparently. But he just kept saying it was an independent process.
It was a kerfuffle at the committee around timing, in the sense that John Barilaro was working hard to get the cabinet submission up, saying that the Trade Commissioner role should be executive appointments. We know he ended up winning the New York Trade Commissioner role, and after controversy, he's had to give up that position. And it emerged that he got that through cabinet around a week before he announced he was resigning from Parliament.
The other thing is they've discovered in his court documents that there are some questions about what he filed in the court for the defamation suit, by the way.
I just want to take you back, Mr. Barilaro, to that final week. It must have been a frantic week, that week of the 27th of September through to the 1st of October, leading to the events of the 3rd and 4th of October. So really your final week in the job. Hit the cabinet table in relatively record time. I won't ask you to comment on that for just 7 working days. The timeline may look frantic. It was business as usual. Are you honestly telling me that the urgency around the cabinet submission wasn't at all related to the fact that you anticipated that at some point in the future Ms. Berejiklian would have to resign? Well, I will absolutely refute that disgusting slur and accusation. Which part? Not all related to the fact that you anticipated that at some point in the future Ms. Berejiklian would have to resign. Well, I will absolutely refute that disgusting slur and accusation. Which part of it's disgusting? No, it is. You're making me out to be corrupt.
Now, did you hear that? Did you hear that?
That you anticipated that at some point in the future Ms. Berejiklian would have to resign. Well, I will absolutely refute that disgusting slur and accusation. Which part of it's disgusting? No, it is. You're making me out to be corrupt.
You're making me out to be corrupt. He says, you're making me out to be corrupt. All we need is the word con man.
On the 16th of September or thereabouts, you lodge a cabinet submission to convert them into ministerial appointments. On the 24th of September, you've declared to a court your intent to resign. On the 27th of September, the cabinet agrees with your submission. On the 1 October, the Premier resigns, and the 4 October, you resign. Equally, it does look like that cabinet submission was being put forward urgently because you knew that at some point Ms. Berejiklian was likely to have to resign, because as you've already admitted, you've been a witness in the IPAC proceeding. It does look like you fast-tracked that cabinet submission in order to be in a position accusation you are making. I'm not making any accusation, Mr. Barilaro.
But he's not very happy, is he? Is that an accusation you are making?
At the time, when you could therefore thereafter apply to it. That is what it looks like. Is that the accusation you are making? I'm not making any accusation, Mr. Barilaro, but I'm just saying, if you take the event you are.
Okay, you can see what Labor's trying to say here. They're trying to say that he set up the roles, he got them through the process they needed to get through to be a cabinet position so that he could then apply for the roles. John Barilaro's story is at that point, in August year, he wasn't applying for the roles, but after quitting Parliament, he decided in November, why not apply for the roles? And he says, I didn't know Gladys Berejiklian was quitting, so I didn't know when I was going to leave Parliament. But the Labor members pointed out he'd given evidence in camera on September 10 at the Gladys Berejiklian ICAC hearing, so he must have known she was under engagement and probably on the way out. Here's a further bun fight between John Graham, the Labor member, and John Barilaro.
Okay, now we're going to get into a bit of an argument here. That there wouldn't be gun laws until there was a shooting in Tasmania. Go ahead, check that.
About the timing of all this.
You're trying to say, and what you're suggesting here is that I knew I was going to retire, therefore I was creating this job for myself. I know where you're going with this, and that is absolute rubbish, which I refute. I completely refute. This evidence does not actually back that. Does not back that at all, because all it says is I will not face another election. I think that was quite clear. Perhaps your colleagues might have wanted to know. That's important context as you not at all advocate to change these roles. No, not at all, because when you say it like that, what you're trying to say is that I was advocating to change these roles to benefit me. No, I was changing these roles based on leadership meetings, based on the request of some MPs and ministers, based on the aspiration of the government through Global New South Wales, a document created by Treasury. I'm entitled to answer. I'm entitled to answer the question. So your colleagues might have wanted to know this. No, because there was nothing to know. There was nothing to know. Actually, my colleagues publicly knew. A lot of my colleagues. You were going to resign. That would not have appreciated, but actually, it was quite public. It was quite public.
Here's the question, though. If he put in his thing that he felt the time was right for him to resign and not face another election, doesn't the reasonable person think that he's going to resign imminently? This was their point. That he gave evidence in the defamation case on the 24th of September that he decided to resign.
I was not facing the next election. And as I said, it was very possible I could have been left back when I took leave. And the reason why I didn't choose to do that, because that's not what I wanted to be remembered for. I didn't want to be remembered for leaving on mental health grounds. So I worked damn bloody hard to get myself back together. A lot of psychiatric and psychology work. I dealt with some demons.
Okay, it gets worse. So
it gets worse. I love as I said, I'm not a Sky News fan, but the deadpan face of this guy just cracks me up.
Members raised John Barilaro seeking a job for his now girlfriend, Jennifer Luck.
Did you make any declarations to Amy Brown when you were giving her a reference and or pointing to the fact that she wanted a job in Investment New South Wales? Declarations in what way? That you were in a personal relationship with that advisor. Relationship at that time? We're flagging that we'll be spending more time on this next Friday, this coming Friday, which is how you came to know about the job and the information that someone you were in a relationship with who can I just say and flag with you, in documents clearly was aware about the various processes associated with the advertising and the nature of this position.
So Jennifer Luxton is working for John Barilaro, and the committee hears, or the committee's heard a lot about this public servant, Amy Brown, who's said to have ferried through with Stuart Ayres' encouragement the Barilaro New York Trade Commissioner appointment. They hear about this phone call Barilaro makes to Amy Brown, pressing the claims of Jennifer Luxton. Barilaro says it's after this that the relationship started with Jennifer Luxton, but I guess the potential for more...
She was in the office, and after she had found out the job was going to be reapplied. Convenient, hey?
Scandal there, and we know John Barilaro's back, so I think that'll be examined further, Kieran.
It goes to the judgment, a lot of this, to the leadership of the parliamentary party, and it all within a year, much less than a year now, from the next New South Wales election.
That's right, and I think this is the interesting bit in a political...
Oh, Robin, but remember, he did say that was his signature, and he doesn't remember signing it, and it was a digital signature, so somebody in his office could have signed it on his behalf. I'm going to use that next time. They go, this is your signature. No, it's not my... that is my signature. Someone must have used it on my behalf.
Sense and the leadership of the state sense, Kieran, is that John Barilaro has gone from Parliament. Stuart Ayres is now gone from the ministry and most likely he'll retire from Parliament. Dominic Perrottet is still the Premier. And we heard evidence this morning that John Barilaro tipped him off twice, saying he was going to roll even before he left Parliament in November, December last year. Perrottet never tried to dissuade him. So you'd have to think that...
Oh, here's the question. If Barilaro was saying in November or December that he wanted the job wasn't up for grabs at that time because Jenny Wester had already had it. So how did he know? How did he know that the job was going to be available at that point in time when he was still a minister? I have got so many more questions than answers from his appearance, by the way. But as I said, we're going to look through some of the articles and the media. But as I said, this is Sky News, so this shocked me.
Public Service, the selection panel, knowing Barilaro is a candidate, must think there's a nod and a wink towards that. And how else could Barilaro take it? He's warned Dominic Perrottet. He's almost sought permission to go for the job here. Have a listen.
And I had a conversation previously in late November when I in a passing comment with the Premier of New South Wales.
And where did this conversation take place?
Look, I just can't recall, but it might have been a phone call. Just a phone call. There was many phone calls after I left with Mr. Perrottet. He was always checking in on me. He was checking in on me, and on one of those occasions, I flagged when as I said that I'd be interested. He had nothing more to say then. Go for it.
And in one of those conversations, you said you raised an interest.
Yeah, I just mentioned that I was thinking about the trade roll in the Americas.
Do you recall precisely what you said, or is that the best recollection?
I think that'd be the closest I could recall.
What did he say?
All I remember was great, or what? I think it was just like great, and that was it. I ran into Premier Perrottet in Martin Place late January, early February.
Okay. And what happened then?
And that's when I told him I applied.
So John Barilaro is telling Dominic Perrottet, I'm going for this job. This is Dominic Perrottet's opportunity, a political opportunity to say, I don't think it's going to look very good. You're only just leaving Parliament and you set up these jobs. He fails to do so. The other guy who fails to do so is the Treasurer, Matt Keane.
So here we go. I mean, this is the thing. He's throwing everybody under the bus. And Barilaro still cannot understand how this looks all dodgy. He can't, as I said, I need to find the footage where he refers to himself as a victim. But he believes he's the victim in all this because he was a private citizen going for a job. He doesn't see all the underlying questions.
Barilaro and Keane hate each other. But Barilaro decides to tell Keane. Why? I think it was to make sure that Keane would not kick up a fuss about the appointment. Again, Barilaro gets reassurance out of that exchange.
I mentioned with Minister Keane that I was considering it.
Apparently, the Fox, New South Wales doesn't have that rule. Apparently. Oh yeah, he
applying for the role.
What did he say about it?
I think he just said he was supportive. I actually don't know. I can't recall
I can't recall.
And your prominent purpose in testing the proposition of Minister Keane was in order to identify whether or not the government would fear political controversy.
Not necessarily. Look, there's no question that I over the years have forged friendships with former colleagues, and like most people would do, they would reach out to those colleagues and to get some level of counsel. But
were you testing whether Mr. Keane would push back on your appointment?
not necessarily. I know people think that Minister Keane.
What do you mean? I'm going to be struck. We're not going to be on for another 30 minutes. Really? I don't know. Anyway, I've just stuffed that up as usual. We're not going to be on for another 30 minutes. Oh, I don't know. No, I thought I said it to 6:30. Anyway. So let's have a look at some of these articles because they're quite telling. This one says, I can't recall. He doubled down. So this is the Sydney Morning Herald. John Barilaro doubles down with fiery testimony. Look at him going. So it says, former Deputy Premier helped his staff member turned girlfriend secure a job at Investment New South Wales, in which he also denied making decisions about his political future when he sought to give ministerial colleagues the power to appoint trade commissioners. Barilaro confirmed he went into that last year to help his now partner and one-time staffer secure a job as a media advisor in Investment New South Wales. So an agency that came under his control and at the time, and was also responsible for later advertising a $500K a year New York trade post. He said, Barilaro said the pair were not in a relationship when he made the phone call. He rejected any suggestion of wrongdoing and described himself as the victim, not the perpetrator. Oh, Karen says, I'm loving every minute of his squirming. Can't wait till Friday. The thing is, I'm working on Friday. So he's, if I wish I'd never applied. If I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have walked into this poo show, he said. Barilaro split from his wife of 26 years late last year, is now in a relationship with Langston, who worked in his office between August 19 and August last year. 2019 and 2020, or August 2021. Labor grilled the former national leader about the timing of his relationship with Langston and the knowledge she had of the New York role to establish where Barilaro had advance warning about its advertisement. Barilaro conceded he rarely contacted Investment New South Wales Chief Executive Amy Brown, but he did call her on an unclear date to spruik Langston's credentials. Labor MP Penny Sharp said the opposition would introduce evidence at Friday's hearing that shows that Langston was involved in media releases advertising the US trade roll. Someone you are in a relationship with who was aware about the various processes associated with the advertising and nature of this position, she said. The inquiry had Langston was copied into an email thread on December 9 about advertising the trade job, which was 8 days before the public advertisement. Barilaro insisted he was successful in securing the role through merit, but conceded parts of the process have simply been problematic. It hasn't been clean as it should be, and I'm the victim out of that, not the perpetrator. He also... it's a clear conflict of interest. It was a huge conflict of interest, Karen. Oh, sorry, Cochrane. Huge conflict of interest. Huge. He said he wished he'd never applied for Trade Commissioner role after the personal hell he'd endured in the 7 weeks since his appointment and subsequent withdrawal from the role. Let's have a look at this one. Look at his face and that. No, don't want that. Well, yeah, I mean, I still don't believe that he should have been able to apply for that job.
A quick decision on your home loan so you can bid with confidence. Yeah, that's how you money.
Yeah, whatever. I just want the good stuff.
John Barilaro back at his old stomping ground, facing off against familiar foes.
If I knew what I know now, I wish I never applied. What I knew now, I wouldn't have walked into what was a show.
A scandal which forced him to forego a prized job in Manhattan and saw him caught up in a late-night melee with a cameraman in Manly.
The trauma I've gone through over the last 6-7 weeks has been significant.
Today, the former
The trauma. Seriously, the trauma.
Deputy Premier finally got his chance to defend how he landed the US trade posting.
This was not a Jobs for the Boys. This was not a captain's big. I went through an independent process.
A $500,000 a year job that he created while in government, and as a minister argued it should be cabinet picking the candidates.
The timeline, etc., coincidental, but I refute any allegation, accusation that somehow I fast-tracked a cabinet submission so that I could apply for it.
If we had to believe your version of events, Mr. Barilaro, we have to basically conclude that you're one of the luckiest men in New South Wales politics.
He says he only became interested in the US.
And he says that he's the unluckiest politician. He's in fact the unluckiest politician. I mean, I want to show the start of Friendly Geordie's video too, because he could not contain his laughter.
Role after quitting as Deputy Premier, so he reached out to his longtime colleague Stuart Ayres, who'd taken over as Trade Minister.
I asked him what the process would be, and then he sent me the advertisement.
Do you understand, for example, any other person who may be interested in filling this role might not have had the opportunity to pick up the phone to the Minister for Trade?
Oh, look, that's a fair statement.
A stacked contact book at his fingertips also delivered an impressive list of high-powered references. Arthur Sinodinos, former Liberal Senator, now Ambassador to the United States, as well as former Liberal Premier turned High Commissioner to India, Barry O'Farrell. Minister Ayres wasn't the only senior Liberal aware John Barilaro wanted the job. The former
It's interesting, isn't it?
Nationals leader told the Premier about it when they ran into each other here in Martin Place. He also flagged his intention to apply with the Treasurer, Matt Keane.
John Barilaro texted me and he said he wanted to apply for a role, and I encouraged him to do so. I mean, then I forgot about it.
The furor surrounding Mr. Barilaro's appointment has dogged the Premier, and last week Minister Ayres was forced to resign amid allegations he involved himself in what should have been an independent process.
The person that was doing your bidding was Minister Ayres.
But if that was the case, it was without my knowledge.
In any case, two separate recruitment searches identified two different women as top candidates, both ultimately cast aside as the state's former number 2 was deemed the best man for the job.
You know, my style of being able to kick down doors, to be aggressive in business.
Some things never change, even if he is trying to put politics behind him.
And our state politics reporter Liz Dang joined me in the studio.
Oh, the Fox? That might be the last live you see for a while. I'm sorry to hear that. Well, I don't. Sorry to hear that.
Is there maybe more revelations to come?
There certainly could be, Pete. We haven't heard the last from John Barilaro. He'll be back in the hot seat on Friday. But tomorrow, Parliament returns after a 6-week break. And while the Premier should have been basking in the glory of a well-received budget, it was instead a miserable win. And Dominic Perrottet lost a lot of skin. In his judgment of the trade saga sees him instead returning to a restless party room of less than impressed colleagues.
Anyway, I have to tell you, the comments on Friendly Geordie's page are hilarious. So then we've got this article here. Barilaro warned to prepare for inquiry dealing over girlfriend's job at Investment New South Wales. The inquiry had Mr. Barilaro recommended his former media advisor and girlfriend for the role at Investment New South Wales. He said so this is her. Investment New South Wales CEO Amy Brown, who returned to the inquiry, she also spoke. She'd been back for the third time. said she remembered a call from Mr. Barilaro in which he said Miss Lugston was looking for new opportunities. He heard we were building our media and communications. I said to him, she's welcome to apply for such opportunities, and my head of media and communications is making arrangements, Miss Brown said. She said Mr. Barilaro didn't make any comments about her relationship with Miss Lugston, and she was awarded the contract with Investment New South Wales in August 2021. It was revealed that Miss Lugston had advance warning of when the New York job was going to be advertised. She was included in the email chain. Mr. Barilaro said Miss Lugston wasn't working at Investment New South Wales when he applied for the job in January 2022, as her short-term contract ended in December 2021.
His appearance was highly anticipated and calls for apprehension among his former colleagues.
Thank you for the opportunity to attend today's inquiry.
Not long into John Barilaro's evidence, he relayed a conversation he had with the Premier.
I just mentioned that I was thinking about the trade roll to the Americas. What did he say? I think it was just like, great, and that was it.
The former Deputy Premier told the inquiry that occurred in November last year when he left Cabinet but was still a sitting MP.
Phone calls after I left with Mr. Perrottet. He was always checking in on me. He was checking in on me, and on one of those occasions I flagged, and as I said, that I'd be interested. He had nothing more to say then. Go for it.
Mr. Barilaro he then informed Ms. Perrottet he'd applied in an unplanned meeting.
I ran into Premier Perrottet in Martin Place.
So these are all the things that they're all picking up. David Elliott pulled out. So Matt Keane is now the deputy leader after Stuart Ayres resigned. Right, this is an amazing. So this is called The Monthly. It's titled "The Unluckiest Man in Politics." So this is a really good article. I came across this today by accident. So it's a podcast. I'm going to let the lady read it to you.
Former New South Wales Deputy Premier John Barilaro's decision to go after a plum New York trade roll that he created while in government, which he allegedly referred to as, quote, the job for when I get the fuck out of this place, and which had already been offered to a qualified public servant, has caused no shortage of pain. Former Liberal Deputy Stuart Ayres has lost his leadership roles over his intervention. Questions remain as to whether Premier Dominic Perrottet misled Parliament, and the scandal threatens to bring down the entire New South Wales government. The saga has also brought attention to other dubious processes. 2 former New South Wales ministers were given last-minute interviews for senior trade roles, despite there already being preferred candidates, and the Premier reportedly told Transport Minister David Elliott that he would create a role for him after dumping him from Cabinet. Perrottet denies this, although admits other roles were discussed. It has no doubt been a distressing time for the original New York appointee, Jenny West, whose plans were upended. She recently told an inquiry how she then lost her existing job over the saga. But if you ask John Barilaro, as the inquiry did today, the real victim in all this is John Barilaro.
Now that's actually quite a great line there. She recently how she then lost her existing job over it. She, it's distressing time. Not only did she lose the job she'd applied for, she lost the job that she was currently doing. It says, but if you ask John Barilaro, as the inquiry did today, the real victim in all of this is John Barilaro. Yep, he's the victim.
There was no shortage of galling moments during Barilaro's long-awaited appearance, during which opposition MPs carefully laid out the incredibly suspicious timeline of events. First, there was Barilaro's insistence that he didn't know that West had been offered the role. As the panel pointed out, there is a New South Wales government document endorsing her as the preferred candidate, signed by him as Deputy Premier. Then there was the fact that he seemed determined to throw as many of his former colleagues under the bus as possible. Barilaro said he told Perrottet, Ayres, and Treasurer Matt Keane he wanted the job, with none of them raising any concerns. Then there was his denial that there was anything sus about asking for a cabinet submission to make trade roles into ministerial appointments to be processed ASAP just before his resignation. He had been, quote, pleasantly surprised at the speed with which it was done. There was his steadfast refusal to name his third referee, questioning why other candidates' referees didn't have to be revealed. It was soon after reported that it was former New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell who famously resigned for misleading ICAC over a bottle of wine. And there was the fact that Barilaro's new girlfriend and former staffer was a media advisor at Investment New South Wales at the time the trade job was re-advertised.
Oh, nothing suspicious about any of that, is there? I'm sorry to hear that, the Fox. I'm sure that you'll be a good friend. The innocent bystander has said John deserves some compensation. I bet he plans to seek, of course. I think, it's just bizarre how he can't see any of that, right? So, yeah, this, as I said, I really like this article.
But by far the most maddening thing about Barilaro's testimony was the overwhelming impression that he considered himself the victim in all this, an innocent, highly qualified Joe citizen who had been swept up in a, quote, shit show beyond his control. I'm the victim, not the perpetrator, he said late in the testimony.
And he did. He actually said those words. I'm the victim, not the perpetrator. He did. I was gobsmacked when I heard that, by the way. Absolutely gobsmacked.
Making it explicit. Barilaro repeatedly told the inquiry that he had suffered significant, quote, trauma as a result of the episode, enduring his own personal hell under the scrutiny. He added that he wouldn't have applied had he known what he knows now, which is that he was going to get caught. Running through the tight timeline that saw the role changed to a ministerial appointment just as he was preparing to resign, Labor's David Murky suggested Barilaro must be one of the luckiest men in New South Wales politics. Contrary, Barilaro insisted, I am the unluckiest man in New South Wales politics, accusing Murky of a disgusting slur.
Yes, so he's the unluckiest man in New South Wales politics.
Barilaro, a politician who proudly embraced the moniker John Pork Barilaro while in office, is clearly not the victim in this story. That role belongs almost exclusively to Jenny West, along with the other highly qualified woman who was bumped during the second selection process to make way for him. But it seemed today that Barilaro, who got very testy when suggestions of corruption were put to him, really does consider himself the victim in all this. It says a lot about Australian politics and its jobs for mates culture that a former politician could try to strong-arm their way into a $500,000 per year post-ministerial role, one for which they were objectively not the most qualified candidate, and then feel so deeply aggrieved when it all blew up in their face. But it says even more about the man himself, who was today only capable of viewing himself of the story.
There you go. So that is, I've put the link in the below if you wanted to have a look at that. That was from the monthly. That was Rachel Withers. Did you like that story? I liked the way that she wrote that. It had that little bit of sarcasm in there. So I did like that. Right, well, let's have a look at, and I'm sure some of you have already looked at it, Friendly Geordie's reaction to this, because, you know, he could not contain himself. Only because he got those pesky YouTubers. Sounds like, was it Scooby-Doo, where those meddling kids, for those meddling YouTubers. So here's Friendly Geordie's reaction, and it was classic. If you haven't seen it, watch it, because that also will show you a lot of the inquiry as well.
I think you know why we've remained relatively silent as to the normal amount of John Barilaro coverage that we give when he is in Parliament explaining how he got his Trade Commissioner position. And thankfully, a huge reason for that is one, that the press is actually explaining it, and Barilaro is explaining it pretty well himself.
He just can't.
What a day. I think that there was a lot to gather from his evidence, and the main one is that he is, to quote himself, the unluckiest man in New South Wales politics. Christ, what a victim complex that man has. There was so much woe is.
You're making me out to be corrupt. Barilaro has flatly rejected any suggestion he fast-tracked a cabinet submission in relation to trade roles so he could apply for one. The cabinet submission, which would have transformed the trades role into ministerial appointments, was proposed and passed in 7 working days. Mr. Mookie argued this was rushed through in September because he knew Miss Barilaro would have to resign in October as a result of an ongoing ICAC questioning. I will absolutely refute that disgusting slur and accusation. Barilaro said, "You're making me out to be corrupt. An ICAC interview can take months and months."
The unluckiest man in New South Wales politics. Christ, what a victim complex that man has. There was so much woe is me throughout the entire day. And
I'm the victim. I mean, aren't you just laughing?
So much woe is me throughout the entire day. And there was one particular part that I think was rather interesting, which was that John Barilaro told the inquiry that the reason that he had finally decided to step down was after Gladys Berejiklian said that she was going to step down on the 1st of October. That's when he claims he made his final decision that he was going to resign. He is then presented with a document that contradicts that by a country mile. Please enjoy this one section of the hearing that is John Barilaro trying to unscramble an egg.
Mr. Barilaro to that final week. It must have been a frantic week, that week of the 27th of September through to the 1st.
So this is where you got to look at some of these, some of the comments down here too. They're great. It's ridiculous that he still calls public scrutiny and criticism trolling and abuse. The poor guy was just trying his best to rot the system without any accountability. After being caught out, wanted to ride off into a high-paid, cushy sunset. Really got a feel for the bloke. He just can't catch a break. Taxpayers propping up a sook. Oh well, he caught a wee break with the resulting $700K settlement with Google. The struggles and the attacks, says the guy who literally tries to bash a cameraman, galvanized an opportunity to resign. If that's not a Freudian slip. Is it too late to deport Barilaro back to Italy or wherever he's from? It says xenophobia is not a good look. I heard someone else said they've heard Google hasn't paid. I wonder if Google will be wanting their money back. After happily being part of a government that was cutting mental health funding on both federal and state level, Sweaty John helped himself to a mental health excuse. And right after saying it's not what he wanted to be remembered for, I'm agog and impressed at this man's unmitigated gall. Thanks for reminding us on that one. Just when you think Mr. Pork Barilaro has plumbed the depths, he continues his victim defense. He's right up there with Obeid and Tribodi. Never gets old, always playing the victim card. Poor John, he was so anguished by YouTube videos that he had to leave politics at some time in the next couple of years. Just goes to show the gall and sense of entitlement these people are used to. He walks out of an ICAC hearing his leader is caught up in and still immediately tries to pull off a $500,000 job for the boys. Yet wasn't anguished enough to want him to aim higher for an overseas commissioning job. He has totally contradicted his reasoning. He left because he was exposed. He's claiming anguished. Guess he was expecting a bit less oversight in New York. You might say he tried to pull another Italian job. He was whining about being accosted in the pub. What about the poor cameraman he and his girlfriend assaulted the other week? Someone else has written Mamma Mia. It's always impressive how they can act as if he's never in the wrong. What else? The best thing is that he's showing his colours and absolutely blew his lid. He comes across as childish and someone who can't contain their anger, and surely as a politician you can withstand a simple statement saying that you retired from politics. I love that in Australia politics the chair of the committee can say fair call there and no one bats an eye. Well, thank you, Cal. Thank you. It says, I took mental health leave. I did get a job in the crisis, mate. I took mental health leave in July. We went into lockdown in August. I spent many days watching this muppet at those daily press conferences. I remember him constantly texting while the health officer read off the number of deaths. He definitely checked out before he voiced any choice to leave. He's like the guy who gets caught with a lighter in a house he doused with petrol, who says he's not an arsonist because he got caught before he actually burnt anything down. Buzz, the implication you're trying to present everyone else, dude, those were your words in a court document, as in those were statements of fact as represented by you. There is no implication. We're cross-examining you based on what you said. We're simply asking you to clarify which statement is correct. Buzz, I feel so attacked now. I watched this today. Today and I thought afterwards... She said that a couple. Yeah, she did say that doesn't fit. Do the pub test. All right. We want both people to be able to speak without being interrupted. Immediately proceeds to interrupt the first question put to him. Barilaro, I'm going to do shopping. Wife, oh, when could you pick up dinner then? Several hours later. Wife, hey John, what did you get us for dinner? Barilaro, when I said I was shopping, I didn't mean momentarily on that day. I meant at some point. Frankly, I don't like what you're insinuating. Anyway, so let's have a look at this. So this gets a little bit heated, but as I said, this is good stuff here.
1st of October leading to the events of the 3rd and 4th of October. So really your final week in the job. The 27th of September, that was the Monday, that was the cabinet meeting. This cabinet submission was considered. That's correct.
From the hearing, that's what I believe. I don't have access to those files.
Yeah, and that was the change. That was when these roles changed to become ministerial appointments. That had, as we've observed elsewhere in the hearing, that hit the cabinet table in relatively record time. I won't ask you to comment on that for just 7 working days. Friday, 1st of October, you made that global trade announcement with others in the morning, correct? And then in the afternoon, that was when the Premier Berejiklian resigned. You've told us on the Saturday, the 2nd of October, you spoke to your colleague, Minister Stokes, about your intentions, perhaps his intentions, certainly your intentions, that's correct?
Correct.
And what did you say to him?
Yeah, so again, you say it was a frantic week. Unless I had a crystal ball and you... at no point did I know that Premier Berejiklian was resigning on the Friday.
She was going to have to resign because I think he must have been the only man around. He must have been the only person around that wasn't expecting her to resign. because everyone was saying she had to go because of the allegations. So he must have been the only person in that hadn't worked that out.
Right, so the timeline may look frantic, but it was business as usual. A cabinet submission that went to cabinet on the Monday was approved. Whatever happened after that in relation to how frantic the week became, no one would have known. And the reality would have been is that I would have not had.
Yes, it was very good. The Fox wife joke is great, and it explains about how ridiculous what he said was. Oh yes, I didn't mean that Barilaro was blinking very fast and talking fast at the start. Then it heats up the devil's tender. Yeah, it was a very good joke.
Resigned that week.
I guess in your previous line of work, Plan to Create, you've seen people like this under interrogation and investigation, so you probably are able to see it more than most as to whether or not the uncomfortableness is feeling and everything. Some of the questions are really great that he was asked.
On the 3rd of October, if the events of the Friday the 1st hadn't occurred. So on the Saturday, as I said, I had a missed call from Minister Stokes, as I recall. I returned that call. And we spoke all things, but in my mind, it felt like it was quite public that he was nominating for the leadership of the Liberal Party. I think he was reaching out to the leader of the National Party, a cold partner. I sense that was part of the conversation. I can't recall. I've got to be honest, I can't recall exactly, but I do remember then going into.
I don't recall exactly, but I remember this part. I remember the parts that made me look good. Just think, Terry, you could have had him in the good old US of A.
Around that, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue anyway, and talking through remembering the events of my break. Part of it was debate around Koala Sepp. Minister Stokes was a part of that. Minister Stokes and I, over the months post, and quite honest with each other, and I believe build a professional friendship. And so to talk something through with someone that you probably wouldn't normally go to for counsel, it was really good for me, therapeutic in a way, that I was getting the advice of an individual that I respected. I used to say he was the smartest person in cabinet. And I do apologise to those other cabinet ministers.
Terry's very thankful for that. I'm a crook, get me out of here. Someone needs to come out and tell the truth about Braz. I was hoping Amy. Well, it's funny how she said she still maintains her decision that he was the right person for the job, even after being told that his resume wasn't quite accurate. He knows he lies slippery. Yeah. Okay, see you, the Fox. I hope everything goes well. Just look forward to seeing you again in the future at some stage.
But you know, and I think at the time, it might have been by text message or phone call over that weekend. I even spoke to Andrew Constance, and I go, again, people probably laugh at this, going, what? You seem to, the people that you had public fights with, you seem to trusted. I think he made a comment that he was part of my decision to go. I still would be very surprised. I don't see, in all honesty, how she can keep her job. That's just me. I think her job's untenable in itself, to be honest with you, because she had no hesitation throwing everybody under the bus. So, you know. And that's when I decided, and I can tell you, Premier Perrottet
on that Saturday,
he was telling me to discussions.
Sorry, on that Saturdays you had these discussions
on the Saturday and the Sunday. And then I spoke Mike, so I had to organise a press conference for that morning. I think there was noise coming out of the media Sunday afternoon or Sunday night. Nothing is ever quiet, as Barry Farabee, my third.
But why in his statement did he put the whole blame onto the court action? Because this is a totally different story as to what he said.
Free. So the reality is, it was over that weekend I decided that the Monday morning I was calling it quits, and subject to I had this defamation case, and don't forget I was also a witness in the ICAC issue with the former Premier, and all of that played on my mind. That I just thought now's the time to go.
Yeah, and I'll just come back to that point you just made. The Premier at that point, or the incoming Premier, Premier Perrottet, asked you to stay at that point. You had made your mind up.
Yeah, well, yeah. Look, when the announcement happened on Friday, just like Minister Stokes, Minister Perrottet had a chat with me about what the next chapter would look like under his watch if he was to become Premier. I indicated that I'm not sure at this stage, and he was asking me to stay. He wanted stability. He knew the role that I played in the roadmap, and I had to be honest with him. And I believe until it might have been Sunday before I contacted Dom or Premier Perrottet that I wasn't contested. I believe that at that point he thought I was staying.
Yeah, and then your press conference, you made this public, an event
So the Premier thought, or the new Premier thought, he was staying until Sunday night. What do you reckon about that? That is a good point. That is a good point. That is a very good point.
folded from there, a rapid resignation from the key role, although, as you've said, you've stayed on as MP.
Yeah, well, I stayed on as MP till December only because initially we thought there were going to be by-elections immediately. I think there was talks about October, November by-elections, and that would have been good. It would have been easy. But then, of course, I think, again, the COVID plans sort of disrupted that, and I think the Electoral Commission wasn't comfortable with it, and that dragged out. So I wanted to stay on as a local member. And not
27th of September, when the Cabinet dealt with this issue, you've said you had the support of others to get it on the agenda. It wasn't all you. The Premier, Gladys Berejiklian, the Treasurer, Dom Perrottet, had ticked off in this leadership meeting to say that this would be on the agenda.
Well, that would have been
earlier,
a week or 2 weeks earlier when the Cabinet Commission was launched.
Yeah, but you had the support of others to have this discussed, but you'd accept, though, in that Cabinet.
You will never own up for any wrongdoing. There's no way to own up for any room. No, as I've discovered myself, I actually have had a phone call from the Internal Affairs Department of WorkSafe after a complaint that occurred when I saw some unsafe things happening that WorkSafe was hosting, and I dared to question WorkSafe about why they were not taking public safety. They said, "What would you like for retro? How would you like this to happen?" I said, "I'd actually like them to admit that they did the wrong thing. However, I won't hold my breath."
Meeting you were a key advocate, the key advocate for this proposal.
I'm the portfolio minister that submitted the submission, but with the support of the other two. But in the end, the support of the whole cabinet bar one.
Yeah. But I think you're saying to us that we should have no concerns that as the key advocate in that meeting, you were yet to decide you were resigning at that point.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not. As I said, if the events of Friday didn't occur, I would have stayed on for who knows how long. Delta, the roadmap, all of the above. I had some of my colleagues urging me not to retire and resign because I had said that I wanted to not contest the next election. And then, of course, all those events, and I made it clear on the day I resigned, I just couldn't do it anymore. Emotionally and mentally, couldn't do it anymore. And with all the events that I was confronted with.
So I might just ask the Secretary to give you a document. I might circulate that.
So with all the events, so it wasn't the defamation case that was the problem.
So I'll just get you to look at that for the Secretary. So this is your outline of evidence in your court case.
Yep.
You can see there, I've given you the full copy. I'm just tabling the first and last pages. I might ask you to turn to the last page of that. And can you just read out the highlighted?
I action to retire from politics. I do not want to face another election.
And what's the date on that down the bottom?
24th of September.
This is the 24th of September. This is your submission of evidence to the court case. Your view. This is before the cabinet meeting.
It reminds me of Harry and Meghan saying we can't deal with the scrutiny of UK, so we're going to go to America. And then complaining about the helicopters flying over their house, you know. In the UK, of course, there is that understanding with the media and the royal family that the children are off limits unless there is permission given or they're at a public event. But those types of things don't happen in England because of the agreement with the press and the royal family. But Harry and Meghan, I just couldn't handle the scrutiny, so I'm going to go somewhere else where I'm going to be under more scrutiny.
For the 27th, a week before you say you made this decision, but this is what you've told the court in your defamation case. I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
Yeah, at some point. And as I said earlier, my initial timeline was I was going to retire on budget week, but unfortunately Delta struck and I was put into isolation.
So doesn't that mean you're sitting in the cabinet meeting as the key proponent, the key advocate for this measure to change this to ministerial? No, you've put in your court statement. You are resigning.
At some point in the term, it says
you know that
I won't face the next election.
Your colleagues in the cabinet
I won't face the next election.
Do they?
No, but I will be facing.
Tell them in that cabinet.
No, I'm sorry, but I've answered the question that, and it's clear here that I therefore made a decision to retire from politics. I do not want to face another election.
He's just read that statement. I'll play it again for you. You tell me, how do you interpret that?
Cabinet.
I won't face the next election.
Do they?
No, but I will be facing.
Tell them in that cabinet.
No, I'm sorry, but I've answered the question that, and it's clear here that I therefore decision to retire from politics. I do not want to face another election. So
I've therefore decided to retire from politics and have decided not to face another election. So here's the question. Has he misled the court? Well, the other thing is, he wasn't taking his girlfriend because she didn't want to leave the kids either. She didn't want to leave her kids.
It's clear today that my intention in June was to retire, but I couldn't. Then I was stuck in the role and doing the work, and who knows when that would have happened. It could have been.
Did you hear that?
Can you see why they'd be
on the eve of pre-selection?
I was stuck.
That I therefore made a decision to retire from politics. I do not want to face another election. So I made that absolutely clear today that my intention in June was to retire, but I couldn't. Then I was stuck in the role and
I was stuck in the role. He was stuck in the role. Stuck in a high-paying job.
doing the work, and who knows when that been on the eve of pre-selection.
Sitting in that for the next election, you know, stated clearly
in the future, in the future.
You hadn't made that clear to your colleagues.
I'm clarifying to you that this statement is that at some point before the next election, I would retire. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm putting to you that these two statements, one you've made to the inquiry.
And he's also either lied. Oh, and that's right. They're saying that the two statements can't be correct. He's about to go and say to him that the statement from the September 24 and the statement that he's made both cannot be true.
In that for the next election, you know you're going to retire. You stated clearly
in the future. In the future.
You hadn't made that clear to your colleagues.
I'm clarifying to you that this statement is that at some point before the next election, I would retire. That's what I'm saying.
Two statements. One you made to Laurie, that you made that decision on Saturday, the 2nd of October, and this statement that you made on the 24th of September cannot both be true.
They're both true. They're both true.
How can they both be true? Oh, look at that pause. Can someone explain to me how both of those statements can be true? I wanted to every time he's independent posted, I wanted to like have a drink, but I don't drink, so it could only be water. Look at the face on him.
As I said, if the events of October 1 didn't occur, I most likely would have still been in the role for months, even now. Who knows? Until it was.
Actually, I do a Braz versus KJ one and sort of put, how they keep changing their stories, because there are lots of similarities there.
The right time to retire. You're trying to say, and what you're suggesting here is that I knew I was going to retire, therefore I was creating this job for myself. I know where you're going with this, and that is absolute rubbish. Completely refute. This evidence does not actually back that. Does not back that at all, because it all.
The statement does back it, mate. But they are both. How can they both be true? I don't understand.
October 1 didn't occur.
Oh, particularly our water, Bo.
Been in the role for months, even now. Who knows? Until it was the right time to retire. You're trying to say, and what you're suggesting here is that I knew I was going to retire, therefore I was creating this job for myself. I know where you're going with this, and that is absolute rubbish, which I refute. I completely refute. This evidence does not actually back that. Does not back that at all, because all it says is I will not face another election. I think that's quite clear.
Perhaps your colleagues might have wanted to know. That's important context as you
not at all
advocate to change these roles.
No, not at all, because when you say it like that, what you're trying to say is that I was advocating to change these roles to benefit me. No, I was changing these roles based on leadership meetings, based on the request of some MPs and ministers.
It does, doesn't it? This gets funny each time. It does, doesn't it, Karen? I love how he says, this doesn't back it up.
Back that, does not back that at all, because all it says is I will not face another election. I think that's quite clear.
Perhaps your colleagues might have wanted to know. That's important context as you
not at all
advocate to change these roles.
No, not at all, because when you say it like that, what you're trying to say is that I was advocating to change these roles to benefit me. No, I was changing these roles based on leadership meetings, based on the request of some MPs and ministers.
Name them. Name them. Are they like anonymous sources that somebody else has? Or, reliable sources?
Based on the aspiration of the government through Global New South Wales, a document created by Treasury. I'm entitled to answer. I'm entitled to answer the questions.
Your colleagues might have wanted to know this.
No, because there was nothing to know. There was nothing to know. Actually, my colleagues publicly knew. A lot of my colleagues.
You were going to resign.
Point of order, Chair.
Appreciated, but
actually, it was quite public. There was quite public that a lot of my colleagues knew that I was not facing the next election.
Mr. Barilaro, I've just Mr. Poulos, I've just a point of order has been taken just in terms of allowing the witness a little bit of time to answer the questions. Members in order. Mr. Fang, I know what you were going to say, and I have just asked the member to allow the witness a little bit more time to respond.
So just for those of you that are not, so this is about, so so you've got the opposition party here, you've got 4 members of the opposition here, you've got the chair and the deputy chair, they're independents, and you've got government ministers here. Now, Barilaro was from the government, so always is really trying to protect this one, where you've got these 4 are trying to, so anyway, I mean, these are, so she's the chair and deputy chair, but that's how it works. So you usually have opposition government representatives. There are a couple of people on working from home. I don't know what they are, but they've not contributed to. I don't know what party they're from. They could be. You could have another government one, another independent, but usually they're pretty much even. So, for example, this is Kate. Somebody. She's a Greens, and this is a shooter. A shooter farmer. One of those from another minor party. So that's how. That's just so that you've got context of where. So these are the opposition. Independent. So they're the minor parties, and government benches. So yeah, he's a private citizen. He's a private citizen now.
On to the questions.
Thank you, Chair. It was very public that I was at some point going to retire. I actually never hid that. I said it quite frequently in the press that I was struggling with the role. And as I said, it was very possible I could have been left back when I could leave. And the reason why I didn't choose to do that, because that's not what I wanted to be remembered for. I didn't want to be remembered for leaving on mental health grounds.
I think Plan to Create brings up a really good point. If he couldn't handle the Deputy Premier, how is he going to handle another job?
I worked damn bloody hard to get myself back together. I did a lot of psychiatric and psychology work. I dealt with some demons, and I actually think I did a wonderful job as a member of the crisis committee and rebuilding the roadmap.
There could be some people that would argue differently about that, but he thinks he did a good job, so that's all that matters, right?
Irrelevant, and it was quite public that at some point I would leave, and it would have been to no surprise of any member of the cabinet that I wasn't hanging around for 2019. So for 2020,
I have therefore made a decision to retire.
Well, I've said to you that in June I made a decision I was going to retire. I've already confirmed that in June I was considering.
Take a point of order, Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Mook is taking a point of
I
order.
understand that usual practice is that there's question followed by answer. You were right to perhaps call my colleague, but maybe my colleague should be now allowed to ask the question, and perhaps the witness might wish to just allow the question to be asked and then he can respond.
Yes, fair call. That is the way that we should be doing things, so that the member should be able to also ask the question without interruption. So let's proceed there, and that order.
That triggered you a bit?
Mr. Fang, let's just go with that. The member can ask the question without being interrupted, and the witness can also respond without being interrupted. That would be wonderful.
The tone was set quite a bit.
Mr. Fang, just
tone of this.
I think. Do you want to? Yep.
Mr. Fang dissenting from the ruling.
No, I'm just making the point, Deputy Chair, that
yes.
Sorry,
Mr. Fang. Said that both the member and witness, if they could just allow each other to speak a little bit without interrupting, that would help proceedings greatly, not to mention our poor Hansard reporters who really struggle when two people speak over each other. So, Mr. Graham, will go with you. At this stage, the crossbench don't have any questions, so you've got the next 20 minutes.
Mr. Barilaro, this document is dated the 20th.
Sorry, they're not independents, they're benches. So anyway, yeah. So they're going to really push on this date thing.
4th of September 2021. When did you sign it, or when did you authorise it to be issued?
Would have been on that day.
On that day. Yep. There's a question over whether it was delivered on that day or otherwise to the 1st of October.
I can't answer that.
You can't shed any light on that?
No, I can't answer that. But as I indicated earlier, I even made a decision back in June. What I was enduring with the online abuse, the trolling, the issues that, of course, at the heart of my defamation case.
There we go. We got the defamation case in there. So was that back in June? Was it? We got it. You got to mention slightly.
I don't have any questions, so you've got the next 20 minutes.
Mr. Barilaro, this document is dated the 24th of September 2021. When did you sign it, or when did you authorise it to be issued?
Would have been on that day.
On that day. Yep. There's a question over whether it was delivered on that day or otherwise to the 1st of October.
I can't answer that.
You can't shed any light on that?
No, I can't answer that. But as I indicated earlier, I either made a decision back in June. What I was enduring with the online abuse, the trolling, the issues that, of course, at the heart of my defamation case, I decided at that point I could not face the next election. Retire at some point, and that never left me. But I couldn't do it in June, and there was no plan initially to do it in October. But an opportunity arose because of the events of 1 October with the.
So essentially, he saw Gladys was getting out, and he thought he needed to make a quick exit too because he didn't want her dragging him down.
Resignation of the Premier of New South Wales. It gave me affinity. Some have criticised me that I left that role with stability, but it gave me the opportunity for a refresh of the government, and that is why, after conversations with some personal friends and, of course, Minister Stokes and others, I made a decision.
You accept that some of your colleagues around that cabinet table, as these roles changed, would not have known that you had made a decision.
No, I disagree. I think a lot of my colleagues knew, because I was quite public throughout my term, that I was not facing the next election. I think that was obvious. Secondly, it is irrelevant to that debate, because this wasn't about a cabinet submission for me.
Mr. Barrow, I just want to have a few follow-up questions arising from the 2 lines of questioning that my colleague just asked you about.
I do like the way he's very calm, Mr. Mickey. Like, it's nice and soothing, and, of course, calling out corruption is now called trolling. Well, for some people, and there is another YouTuber that we know, that if you say anything bad about them, you're a troll. If you question them, you're a troll. And the lawsuit was right about everything. His affair, him being corrupt, and the lawsuit was to stop it from being investigated. That's Plaintiff Creates Opinion. Dane says, Bruce was thinking, how can I make my smacked out brain make sense with what I just said? It doesn't make any sense.
First, just in respect to this particular statement that I think we've established you provided the court, was it the New South Wales Supreme Court? Federal Court, on the 24th September 2021. I think my colleague took you to the first 2 sentences, which you read out, but the third sentence does say this. To be fair, it's what you just said. Although I have previously contemplated resigning, the respondent's conduct has played an instrumental role in my decision. That's abundantly clear. When you read the first in conjunction with the second, an ordinary reader may well conclude that at that point on the 24th of September 2021, you reached a point of definite decision as opposed to future decision. Now, I'm going to ask you to respond.
So he said the respondent's actions had led him to make a decision earlier. So it's interesting, isn't it?
Because to be fair to you, Mr. Barilaro, you've told us just then that you said, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics at some point, is what you said to us. But to be fair, that's not what you said here. You said, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics, not at some point. And I do not want to face another election. I accept that. I do accept that, Mr. Barilaro. What I'm asking you to
He's going, oh dear.
Respond to is that you make the point that you've previously contemplated resigning, and the respondent's conduct made the instrumental role. Absolutely. And that's not clearly, that's abundantly clear to all, and that's what's happened. But the issue is again, that's not said or clarify this to the court, because otherwise you are leaving the impression that what you've told us today is at least more complete an answer than you provided the court on 24 September 2020.
You know what I thought? You know what I've got to do is I actually need to go and find the judgment, because I wonder whether the judge has made reference to him leaving politics. If the judge has interpreted that he was leaving politics at that time, then the inquiry's got him. So I might make that my bedtime reading tonight. I might sit and read the judgment, and if needs be, I'll email it to them and say, hey, this is in the judgment. This was the judge's interpretation. Be very interesting, wouldn't it?
Not at all. This is reflective of the time and how I was feeling and how I felt. And this is absolutely in line with what I said in the court. Today I've been able to give you a full answer in relation and an honest answer that I even said that
he said he gave an honest answer. Yeah. It's been annoying me Plan to Create, actually, because when you read what Mookie said with what's, it does actually give the impression that he's leaving, that the respondent or the lawsuit, or Google, as it was at that time, caused his decision to be brought forward, which totally now contradicts everything that he's said in the inquiry. Whoa.
pressures that I was going through, the struggles and the attacks, and you are aware because it's quite public. It wasn't just online. There was threats when I used to go to a local pub, etc. So the reality here is that I originally wanted to leave in June, but because of Delta, that didn't occur. That didn't take away that I made a decision I would not face the next election. Now, you want to get caught up on the words. I'm giving you today exactly what went through my head at that time, and it's in line with what I said on the day that I retired.
Well, the other point you made in respect to the questioning asked by my colleagues, you said...
So he's not even, Mr. Mookie has not even raised his voice. Brazzy's getting all agitated, and Mr. Mookie's just like sitting there and just calm as a cucumber and going, okay, well, you've said,
That you brought the submission after you were requested to do so by ministers and MPs?
Not requested, but as I said...
What were the words you used?
Well, no, I said that in discussions with MPs and ministers, they raised the issue around the escalation, and then at a leadership meeting, which includes the Premier, therefore...
when he says, that's not what I said. But yes, that's what you did say, mate. You did say it.
Therefore, concluded from that meeting that I would bring a cabinet submission.
So we'll get back to that, rest assured. But you did make the point that you had the support of the full cabinet, bar one.
Yep, on the day, yes.
Who was the one?
That's a cabinet decision, and I don't think I'm bound not to.
Fair enough, but you're telling me that the entirety of the cabinet, with the exception of one member, supported your submission to turn these into ministerial appointments.
Yeah, well, what I will say this is cabinets don't vote on anything.
Well, here's my question, okay? If, as he said, cabinet agreed to make it a ministerial position, why then hasn't it been transferred into a ministerial position? Why was it that he could apply as a public citizen? If he was saying that the go-ahead from cabinet was that it was going to be ministerial position, then why hasn't it been?
For and against, it was actually quite a vocal debate in support of, but one minister had reservations about why we would do it, but it didn't mean he didn't vote for it.
Oh, he's a lawyer, is he? That's interesting, yeah. Well, I'm a student lawyer and I had work safely planned to run away to New York. I think so, Terry. I think he was going to New York to just start again. Well, there are still claims he could be still caught up against from ICAC about some stuff. So he was probably hoping to be out of sight, out of mind.
Don't vote, and therefore the cabinet cabinet solidarity. That's right, and therefore the decision of the cabinet stands that it was supported.
Mr. Barilaro, you have publicly said on quite a few occasions that you were considering, you said when you initially stood, you said you were only going to stand for 2 terms. Yep. This is something that you kind of discussed publicly a lot, is it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You're aware of it because you were the duty manager down in the Monero. So
your colleagues may have been aware of this kind of general discussion in the media that you were you'd been toing and froing a bit. Like you say, you'd made a decision or you thought you'd made a decision in June, but you'd come back from that decision. Is that correct?
Look, there is no question in my mind that my colleagues, ministerial and MPs in this government, in the coalition government, were aware post my break that I was leaving. I think I can hand on heart say that for many of them, they knew I was not facing 2023.
Yeah, but that's
You're not facing 2023.
a very different. That's a very different thing, though. General discussion when you're going to leave, as opposed to putting your name on a signed court document that says, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
But I have.
The implication from this, from anyone's reading of this, Mr. Barilaro, you would understand, is that it was imminent. Would you appreciate that?
It wasn't imminent. So you want to assume that, and that's the suggestion and the accusation you're trying.
Mr. Barilaro, it comes down to what the reasonable person, and the reasonable person would assume that you were leaving straight away. It's not about what you thought or whether you've put it you haven't worded it properly. I think you need to actually go back to your barrister, the one that needs to find $400,000, and go tell her that she messed up your document.
Mate, because it works for your timeline, but no, because it was clear that it said, and you keep pulling away from this, but I do not want to face the next election. The next election is in March 2023, so that gives you a very big window. At some point in that timeline, I would retire from politics.
But you didn't include that in your statement. Why didn't you include that, Mr. Barilaro?
Because I didn't need to, because this captured exactly what I felt and what I believed in and why I resigned, and the events of October 1 galvanised at that point an opportunity for me to resign.
But do you understand, Mr. Barilaro, that you might be arguing the semantics? We've got a signed,
you're the one that argues stuck in the semantics.
We've got a signed statement here from you, submitted to a court. It's a very serious document that says, I have therefore made a decision to retire from politics.
Before the next election, can you read the whole statement?
I do not want to face another election, although I've previously contemplated. Respondent's conduct has played an instrumental role in my decision.
Absolutely.
The implication from that, Mr. Barilaro, is that is imminent.
No, it's not.
Mr. Barilaro, did you ever convey this new decision to your colleagues as you were discussing to transform the stick appointments to ministerial appointments?
Well, firstly, I refute your statement. I refute the accusation or suggestion you are making in relation to what was behind my statement to the courts, which I stand by. That's the first part. The second part is it is absolutely irrelevant to my colleagues in relation to what I was going to do when and where in relation to retirement on a cabinet submission that was in relation to a broad government policy that I had no intention at that point of applying for or being part of. The accusation you are making is I created a stick role for myself, and therefore I should have informed my colleagues that I was going to resign at some point in the future, and somehow this job would be for me. Senator, I refute that.
Whether it's relevant or not, isn't
It's
that
not
really
relevant.
their judgment?
It's not relevant.
Sounds like there's more to come out on Friday. Guess you're going to have...
See, did you hear that? It was just really interesting. I love how he goes like that. I love how he comes. Lots of money
In relation to what I was going to do when and where in relation to retirement on a cabinet submission that was in relation to a broad government policy that I had no intention at that point of applying for or being part of. The accusation you are making is I created this for myself, and therefore should have informed my colleagues that I was going to resign at some point in the future, and somehow this job would be for me. Senator, I refute that.
Whether it's relevant or not, isn't that really their judgment?
It's not relevant.
So here we go. It says he'll be questioned further on Friday about his past relationship. So apparently the chair says she takes no joy in asking questions about a personal relationship, but the inquiry must determine how Mr. Barilaro, in fact, it wasn't the chair. It was. So what do you reckon? He's done.
Sounds like there's more to come out. You're going to have to stay tuned for that, folks. See you next time.
There you go. That was, and then it goes to Super Smash Bros. Do you reckon? What do you reckon? How do you reckon he'd be at the moment? Do you reckon he'd be sweating? Anyway, so as I said, it's been amazing. Yeah, so I put all the links of articles if you want to keep going and keep reading that. Yeah, there's just a lot of trouble at the moment, and Barilaro is in again. So I now am going to pull up the judgment and see whether I can find anything from the judge's thing. Just one more thing. This is from the Canberra Times. Oh, yes, we need to also acknowledge that Olivia Newton-John passed away. So, revelations about John Barilaro's appointment has left New South Wales Premier concerned and disappointed. So it said the scandals left him disheartened and he needs to seek advice on reports Mr. Barilaro had met with one of his former ministers in June. The whole situation has been incredibly disappointing. Well, he's been involved as well. Mr. Barilaro was a former trade minister, former deputy premier, and that has been forgotten, I believe. As revelations come out in respect of the process, I'm concerned and disappointed. So it concedes Mr. Ayres has concerns that Mr. Ayres may have breached the ministerial code of conduct. And on Tuesday, News Corp revealed Mr. Barilaro had met recently with recently sacked former Fair Trading Minister Alani Patinas in June, while the former Deputy Premier worked at a development company, Coronation Property. The June 21 meeting occurred weeks before a building ban on a $500 million Coronation Property development was lifted. Mr. Perrottet told Parliament he was not aware of the reports but would seek advice. So Mr. Barilaro still could be, there's questions now over his involvement with a politician over a development. The report claims that former Building Commissioner David Chandler cited a problematic relationship with Ms. Patinas in a resignation letter. Mr. Chandler resigned in June and will conclude his role in November. So he's got his hands in another pie. The June 21 meeting occurred weeks before a building ban on a $500 million Coronation Property development was lifted. So the inquiry will reveal on Friday. We'll talk about. So he revealed he gave a professional reference to his former media advisor. The inquiry is interested whether she had any sway over his appointment during her time in Investment New South Wales. So she stopped working for the agency in December. Now, Amy Brown had said that they had requested a conflict of interest, but come from them, and they didn't get anything, and so they ended her role earlier. So yeah, so it's going to be interesting. So yes, so there's another scandal that he could be involved in. Dodgy dealings in Barilaro seems to be very interesting. All right. Well, so I'm going to love you all and leave you all. Thank you for watching. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Don't forget you can join and be a member if you desire to. You can, if you want to support the channel, there are ways that you can support the channel. They're all listed below. Have some fun and read the documents. Watch you put a John Barilaro in the search engine, you will find there are lots and lots of videos about this. So I want to thank you for watching. Let's get physical, physical. I want to get physical, the physical. Let me hear your body fall. Anyway, yeah. Yes, hopefully Friday. So, yes. Okay, I will catch it all later on. And I will post the link in my community tab for Friday. So those of you that are able to and would like to watch can watch. It's going to be, I reckon it's going to be very fiery again. Or maybe he'll call in sick. Anyway, thank you for watching. Bye for now.